A lot of doors seem to be locked, and we try to bash through them. There's doors that are open. Stop being a fool and go to the door that's open. I have found myself trying to bring people along, or trying to have people like, come on, let's go through this door, realizing that there's a door that's open right in front of me.
Yeah.
I'm just not paying attention to it and being present with that person when they're right in front of me. They're not online, they're in front of me. And I think that notion of going further, right? It's those people that I'm in search of, while also understanding that it's got to start from you, because it always starts from you, and it always will start from you.
What's up, podcast family? We have a really, really special guest for you today. My man flew in all the way from San Leandro, California. If you don't know, look that up. Maps are real. They're available. But I've just got a gem of a human, and I was writing him a note with gratitude, and I said, finally, the years of distant admiration end. And we finally meet face to face today. My man Charlie's a former pro baseball player. Today he's a keynote speaker, executive coach on things like mindset, leadership, communication, and identity. But more than that, he is a one-of-one husband to Leah and a certified girl dad to Sienna, Avery, and Sydney. Ladies, thank you for sharing your father with us today in Detroit, Michigan. It's going to be a beautiful conversation. Charlie Ruiz, welcome to the lab.
Thank you. Thank you. Honored to be here. Thank you for having me. This is a treat. This is a treat.
Yeah, man, I'm so pleased that you're here. And one of the key words that I think about often when I hear of you, see you, observe your content, and you already said it like 4 times in our first 15 minutes of catching up, is presence. Unpack what you mean when you speak about presence professionally or personally with those you love in your life.
I think it's the root of everything for me, Manny. I think the awareness that I've learned over the years, it's what we're all seeking. It's what we're all trying to find out. We're trying to put actions to it. And I think when I learned at such a young age, truly going back to the most important lesson I probably got from my mom and dad growing up in the apartment complex, that they still live 10 minutes away in the apartment complex, like in the same area that we live. That's why I'm back in the Bay. They were present. Like in every way, not just for me, but for the community. Our house was always open. And instead of my mom taking maybe a job downtown, she's like, let me go ahead and just manage the apartment complex here. So the door is always open. And it was always this notion of like, I'm here, I'm accessible, I'm present. And I think more and more that I walk into this space, I feel that in every other sense of like what people are trying to find. And it's like, no wonder why this is what I talk about. It's because I always had it. Whether it's from my mom, my dad, or my godfather, who lived in the apartment across the street from us.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow. Share with our listeners maybe a memory or two of your childhood that you would say continues to expand on this focus on presence and the power of presence. Whether it's family, growing up playing sports. I mean, you were a standout baseball player. You've got a stud of your brother, like a stud of a brother. Jake?
Yes.
Yeah, so shout out to my man, Jake. Share a story or two that really stands out for you about that.
Oh, childhood. When I think of presence and this notion, so the apartment complex I lived in, it wasn't very big, but we were fortunate to have this like green, like a little grass area in front where we would play wiffle ball. And for me, wiffle ball was like, that's what you did.
Yeah.
But we didn't have a field. So we had like the back of a building with a line and then bushes, whereas like a single was anything on the ground, a double was on the grass bush area, and then a triple was above the line, and a home run was, of course, on the roof.
Yeah.
And I think at any given time, when I think of the house being open, and by house, I mean the small apartment, where we would literally have the doors open, all of the kids at Parkside, shout out Parkside, we would be there in the back playing. And it was just known as like, Linda's house is always open. Mind you, she's the manager of the actual complex. But every kid in the neighborhood was there, to where even to this day, I'll run into somebody from Parkside and they go, there's a golf tournament the other day, and Dontrell Willis, right, former professional baseball player, World Series with the Marlins. I was like, Dontrell, do you remember Parkside? My mom, Linda. And he was like, oh my, I love my time at Parkside. That was all because the kids in the community there, like, were always present. And my mom, my uncle, my dad, all being there allowed that space, and everyone knew each other because it was open.
I love that. I love that. When did you first realize that you were going to have a real gift for playing baseball?
First love was basketball, Manny.
Yeah, say more.
That's what I played. Growing up in San Leandro, right outside of Oakland, basketball got all the juice, right? Baseball wasn't necessarily the thing. However, based on the conversations with my dad and my uncle, we would always talk about Willie Mays, which I would love to tell you a story about that, because I was in Birmingham the day that I found out he passed, which we'll get there. But it was always the reality of like baseball, and basketball was like the flash, baseball was the mind. And I knew that it was more of like nostalgia and the relationships and the history of it that lured me into it. Then all of a sudden you realize, oh, I could play a little bit.
Yeah.
I can't dunk, but I got an arm on me. Now you're 12, 13 years old, and you're like, okay, maybe I can pursue this a bit. And I did both in high school.
I love that. You're a very, very decorated baseball player. Was there a moment, a mentor or a coach that created the moment when you said, okay, I'm gonna pursue baseball with everything I've got?
Probably my senior year of high school.
Okay.
Is when it started to click, and I realized I got something here, but I still didn't quite know. So a lot of people would probably say, or the way I think about it is my junior college was the most transformational years for me. Not Long Beach State down in Southern California, not pro ball. It was the 2 years at my junior college when I realized if I can find the ability to slow down when everyone else is speeding up. And I got the ball at the end of the game, and my two coaches there would emphasize, like, if you can slow down, you are going to do damage. And if you can do damage here at this level and continue that same mental foundation that we built here and carry that in, you can quite literally get a scholarship and be the first to go to college in your family. And that's what it became. Like, let me be the first to go get a degree and do something a bit different than because my parents have sacrificed. Yeah. And that became my mission. I just kept getting lucky.
Was there somebody in your life in and around the game of baseball that you think led you down the journey that you chose to go down in terms of schools? Because you could have played at a lot of different schools.
I think of the conversations I had with my three heroes: my mom, my dad, and my uncle, my godfather. I talk about him in my keynote. He was the core for me, in addition to my parents. And he would always, former military vet, would always...
Thank you for his service.
Yes. And he would always emphasize, like, for me and my little brother, is like, how are you staying accountable and doing the things that you know you are meant to be doing in this world? And I wish to this day, like, if there's one person I could sit and have dinner with as a man, as an adult, as a father, it would be him. And I think that I realized through my talks with my mom and my dad, who were always like, whatever you got, baby, we're here. It was his, like, discipline and his life of service that put me into a space of, like, how can I play this game and honor those that came before me and then those that will come after me? And that's a lot of what I talk about now. And he's one of them.
I mean, you had a good career, played at 2 schools, good statistics, drafted in 2009.
Yep. Gosh.
Do you remember that?
To this day, I remember the terrible Ed Hardy shirt I was wearing at my sister's house, right? At that time, they didn't have anything on TV.
No.
So it was like the computer screen where it was like, pick 300, pick 301, and then the name goes up, and all of my friends and family are at my sister's house. I remember it to the day. And again, it felt like it was house money because never thought I'd be there. Like it was, I couldn't believe it, right? And 10th round is like, you're not a top pick, but you're also like, you got enough juice to where it's like, hey, they want you.
Yes.
Top 10 round pick. Like, let's go.
Yes.
And yeah, surrounded by my family and my loved ones, like one of the best days ever.
And Colorado, man, that's a beautiful place to go play.
To
play baseball.
There was like this moment where I remember sitting there and talking to my dad and my mom. And they were like, did you ever think that like from where you were at and like where you're going into, like where you were at from being a junior college kid, not playing, to getting a chance to sign this contract, like, did you ever think you'd be here? And I still say, I was like, no. And most professional athletes would tell you, oh, I knew this is what I dreamt about as a kid.
Yeah.
I can honestly say it was never like that.
Huh.
I love the game, and I just love the stories, and I'm like, let me just keep getting lucky.
Yes.
But I realized later it wasn't luck.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that like, I mean, we hear people like Jocko Willink. I mean, even guys like Ben Newman, who, again, shout out to my man Ben. I mean, he just connects the world intentionally or even indirectly, right? Talk about the significance and responsibility of living with discipline. It's almost as if, like, when we're young, we have this, like, maybe somewhat of like an insecurity or self-defeating thinking, like this thought that like, well, maybe I'm a fraud. Maybe I'm just getting lucky. And I'm like, now that I'm older, I'm like, no, man, we stacked 1 million micro wins to get to this. Like, no. We stacked 1 million micro wins to get to this point. And yet we still got that little voice, that little white noise, right?
It's there.
It's nuts.
It's there. And I don't know if it'll ever not be there. And I think now in some of the work and how I try and position and think about presence, right? It's like, it's allowing that space to be there. While also knowing we can be disciplined, not just in the areas that people typically want to be disciplined at. And that's a lot of what I talked about today, right? We can be disciplined with our workouts. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. The Jockos of the world, Ben, right? Like, he's a master at it.
Oh,
that's where I'm taking that. I'm like, can we have that same type of tenacity, that grit, and that resilience, and the conviction to be disciplined about the way in which we're showing up for our kids, for how we're making breakfast, for how we're looking up and talking to our neighbors? Like, can we have the conviction there? How do we do that? And that's where, like, that little voice to me, I'm like, can we do it there too?
Holly and I talked about that this morning. I went on like a rabbit hole rant of a like spontaneous video where I wake up and I'm like that young man on that somehow always in my thread saying, not every day's going to be a good day, but every day's a blessing. Big Motion. I love that little guy. I'm sorry I don't have your name at the top of my head right now to give you credit, but I walk in every day and I'm thinking like, man, I'm so thankful to be vertical. Let's go. Right? Let's go. Be kind, add value, solve problems, control the controllables, attitude, effort, energy, and let's create some progress over victory. I'm walking in the building this morning, hold the door open for 2 young ladies. They walk past me like they don't even see me. Like, all right, okay. Come down the steps from the garage, say hello to another person I've never seen, just looks down at his phone, walk past 2 other people, say hello, good morning. No acknowledgement. I got on that elevator up. Man, I was like coming up that elevator like a rocket. And I was like, you're like, I'm trying to start every day stacking as many micro wins as I can in the morning to control the momentum and trajectory of where my body is going with this tiny little 8-pound, 10-pound freight train of a brain.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, where are these people going? And what type of low energy, low oxygen level are they taking into an environment that requires good habits, good discipline, good execution? And I'm like, I'm just blown away because this seems simple.
Seems simple. And a lot of what we talked about when we walked in here, right? That attitude, effort, energy, the controllables, right? I have my own way in which I define presence through what those controllables are. And when it comes to these baby girls on the soccer field, right? What do you can control? Maybe it's the attitude, it's the effort, it's the energy. Great. Where do we miss that, or where do we start to think about that differently in our adult life?
Yes.
Right? Like if you have our coaches that are telling us this, great, on, off the field, in and out of the locker room. Great, now we're done playing. And if you don't have that person who's keeping you accountable to that, the attitude, effort, energy, or you aren't making that make sense for your own current state of your work, then now, like, what do? And that's a lot of the reason why I do what I do is because I finish playing and I go however many years not really getting that type of guidance, of structure that I needed, that I wanted to remind me of those things that I knew in my bones that I did on the field for years.
I want to come back to the transition because I think it's a powerful conversation and season in your life.
You will.
Unpack that framework that you teach and coach today around presence. Please unpack it.
Sure. So a lot of the basis for the keynote and my work regardless is around defining presence in an actionable way. And I think of it through my 4 C's, the 4 commitments that I make every day. It's your core, right? What am I doing for myself? Mind, body, to show up every single day. How am I present with myself? Mental performance, right? There's a lot of different pieces of like the core. How do I stay committed there? 2, it's the community, right? How am I showing up for my community, which is my people?
Yeah.
Your relationships at home, your friends, your community. 3 is the craft. This is where people typically spend most of their energy. This is where they are present the most. The craft, whatever your craft is, whether that's being a financial advisor or a professional athlete, the craft. And the 4th, which is the fun one, that's your creativity, right? Your play. It goes back into like, how am I being present in my creative sense of being, where I'm not thinking about an outcome. It's being able to answer that question to the 13-year-old boy or girl to say, hey, here's what you're creating. Here's what you're playing today as a 36-year-old man, as a 45-year-old man. Like, would they be proud of that answer if you're telling your 13-year-old self that? Those 4 ways in which we think about to be present, it's like, let's start there. And then it's creating spaces and plays for people to be present. In community, listening, that's one of them. We don't do that. I could go on and on about the different elements of that, but that's the foundation. It's the 4 C's. Can we be present in these areas? Most of the time, we are just focused on our craft and our profession. We aren't keeping track or keeping score in any of the other areas.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you expanded on that for our listeners. I immediately think about how much suffering exists in the professional world because we don't, and I as well, many times, my beautiful wife Samantha listening, my children Ava and Atlas listening, have missed the mark on putting self and relationships first prior to craft. So, just always craft, and then if I have time, core, community, and creativity.
Yes.
Right? And it's like, well, what got me here was actually having incredible community as a child, an incredible safe space for creativity, thinking I'm going to be Batman or the middle linebacker for the Chicago Bears. Like, oh, dude, I'm going to be Batman or Mike Singletary. I'm going to be the Mexican Mike Singletary. This is going to be incredible.
I love it.
You know what I mean? Like, literally, that's what I dreamt about 90% of the time. And because I had the community that created that safe space for creativity, I then prioritized my core because Batman was jacked. Batman was like, yeah, Like bullets bounce off the Teflon armor, and I was never even really worried about craft. Like craft was just what ended up coming out as like micro outcomes of having a really safe space for community that focused on creativity and core. And now, Ben would tell you I'm 20 pounds overweight, things about my discipline around working out, allowing injuries to become excuses, all of which he is right about. And so I just craft, more, win more, scoreboard.
And that is the thing right there of like, can you redefine or keep score differently? And that's the talk, right? That's where I go in. I'm like, how are we reconstructing the way in which we think? Because as athletes, right, and even just in life, winning is typically binary. You win or you lose. You win or you lose. Championship or bust. We hear it.
Yes.
We got the win. Sloppy, but we got the W. Great. That's in sport. Well, now is a bit different, right? And a lot of what I talk about is here I am having career-ending shoulder surgery.
Yeah.
And then I get home, and a lot of my talk centers around the fact that I get home and I get an opportunity to spend time with my mother-in-law, with my late uncle, who I've talked about, and then my teammate, all having passed away from cancer within 3 years, where I would have been at spring training, but instead I'm taking my uncle to the VA. I'm getting a trip with my mother-in-law, driving up and down the coast, and I'm getting a visit with my teammate in Huntington Beach. And I'm getting time with them. So it's these small moments along the way where here I am, miserable selling software in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Yet I'm getting some time to reconstruct the way in which I'm thinking about winning. So those conversations all became wins for me.
Wow.
Now we lost them.
Right.
But man, I got time with them. I wouldn't have got that time.
Yes.
So, okay, now let's take that and transport it into this current state of where I'm at 9 years post, and I'm getting into rooms and talking to these people who are leading these companies all across Silicon Valley who are miserable.
Yes.
Because they are not putting any energy into anything outside of their craft until they hit whatever time they hit. And they're like, whose game am I playing?
That's right. That's right. In our society does an incredible job of creating confusion and distractions about ultimately what really matters.
Absolutely. Until something tragic happens.
That's right.
And then all of a sudden it snaps us into this moment of like, oh, I got to be in the moment. Nah, let's be in the moment now, right here, right now, every single day. And then be able to adapt in the moment to go, hey, where am I being disciplined for the conversations that I'm having? Where am I being disciplined in understanding who I am in my core and how I'm developing? Which kind of goes into a little bit what you shared earlier of like from an identity perspective. The biggest thing I think I got almost a year to the date, last year, if I may, can I talk to you about my identity marathon?
Please, I love it.
I always had in my mind, I leave Vegas actually after meeting Ben in person and the whole crew, and I'm like, I've been talking about doing a marathon for a while. And running used to be punishment for baseball. Yeah. And a lot of people still see that as punishment. But I found this cathartic like motion 4 years prior in the middle of the pandemic when I ran for, I didn't like the name of it. It was Man or Woman of the Year for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society.
Oh. Yeah.
In honor of some of these people that I just mentioned.
Sure.
And I found myself running 3.5 miles a day to try and raise money. We ended up raising $100,000. I took second in the San Francisco Bay Area, asking people for money in the middle of the pandemic, which was like
that's tough
wild.
Time. Yeah.
But I say that because then now here I am 4 years later wanting to run a marathon. For some reason, I'm like, I could do it. I got lost one day running at the old apartment complex. I was like 9 miles in, and I ran by my uncle's old place. I ran by the area where we played wiffle ball, and I got emotional. And I like legit was crying running, and I'm like, whoa, what is this? So I got home, told my wife, I was like, hey, December 23rd, I'm going to leave this house, and I'm going to go map out 26.2 miles by myself, and I'm going to go run to my old junior college, my old Little League, my elementary, my grandma's house, my other grandma's house, and I'm going to go hit every single where in my life that meant something to me. And I'm going to have my brother down in my junior college, my other good buddy at my high school. They're going to give me water, and I'm just going to go run. So December 23rd last year, I ran what I'm calling an identity marathon, and I would encourage people to find that time to go do that. You don't got to run 26 miles, but go find a space of like, and being able to reflect on who was I here?
Yeah.
How does that show up today?
Wow.
And man, that still to this day is like, I came 4 minutes over my time. So man, my wife was like, now you're going to do it again. I'm like, you're right. But that moment of like coming down to my finish line and it being, I think it was a bathrobe that the two girls were holding on my front porch and finishing my identity marathon was probably one of the most transformative things that I've ever done. And that was a year ago. This then put me in a space where I'm like, all right, start owning your story, start talking your talk, and start like leaning into this whole space of truly what it means to show up in your full self.
Yes.
Which is a whole nother piece of presence that I'm trying to help and work through with other people that I'm working with.
Well, one, that's incredibly powerful. I was not aware of that. I mean, there's so many.
Yeah, I took a side.
No, there's just so many words that just came to mind about just like the growing admiration I have for you, like just the courage, the commitment, the conviction, the grit, the emotional depth, like the ability for a man to say like, I don't just need this, but I want to do this. And I can't wait to see what happens when I do, you know, and the vulnerability to bring those people into the experience with you and say, hey, I need you there.
Yeah.
And for a man to say, I need you there, which
we don't do.
It's like, oh, you know, I don't want to be a marshmallow, you know, it's like little boys don't cry. Like, you know, all the good things that we were raised on.
It truly is your superpower to be able to do that.
Yeah.
I wish we did more.
I love it. I'm glad you shared that with our listeners. Let's pivot back because I want to go forward and really talk about the coaching career. I love the story. I love where you're going. We have to do a project together. Humanity needs more mentors, developers, coaches, consultants, people really pouring in. So we're going to do something together. But talk to me about what it was like to know that you had to give up the bat and the glove. Because that was really rather unexpected, and from what I've understood from a distance. And so just share that story, share that experience, and maybe what was the biggest lesson you learned coming out of that you kind of have taken forward into this explosive trajectory you are on with your speaking and coaching business?
Yes. The transition was a slow burn for me. And I say a slow burn as in by the time I got hurt, it was almost 2 years, 20 months plus of when the doctor said you got a 15% chance to recover because I had holes in both sides of my shoulder, to where I was like, all right, it's better than zero. Let me go ahead and give it a go, right?
What a winner. Savage.
And then you come back, and I never advice to people who are going through that space, especially from an athletic perspective, is to be able to find a way to close the chapter on your own terms. It was advice that I was given. And a lot of people don't find the time to do that. Mm-hmm. I fortunately was coaching in my junior college, the same one that kind of really helped shape me. And I remember I was coaching the guys, and I had my dad come because I was like, Dad, you know, he's rooting for me, clearly, right? And I was like, you got to come. I'm throwing to the team today. I'm going to see where I'm at. This is 20 months past.
Yes.
And then I have my other buddy who's behind the gate kind of watching from a distance. And I go out there, give it all I got, right? These junior college kids are getting good swings on me. I know it's not coming out, but I had to find a way to close it. I come out, I look at the gun, the guy behind the guy behind the home plate was like, you were 80 to 83. You hit 83 once. And at that point I was like, I'm 20 months past. I hugged my dad, cried. And then he knew that I knew that it was time. And that was the first like transition to like, okay, now what? Next day I had that same emotional conversation with my junior college coach. And then it was like, okay, now what?
Yeah.
And what I wish I knew then was that there's people that are going through this and that they need help.
Yeah.
And it's not about the transition. And this is the big key for me that I'm really emphasizing now. It's not about the transition. It's about the development. The transition's always going to be tough. It's always going to be hard. But the development of inward before outward is where the work needs to happen, especially for an athlete or anyone, military, transitioning to this next phase.
And that's what's really missed most consistently.
Exactly. Let's get the person the job or get them into a space. Awesome. Now they're there.
Yeah.
That's when they need you the most. That's when they need you.
Yes.
They don't just need the job. They need you once they're in the job. That's what I didn't get. And that's where I'm like, I'm going to go find a way to make that happen. And I wish I would have told myself that.
Yes.
9 years ago. And I would tell anyone else, go find a way to close a chapter, close the book on your own terms, and then go find 3 to 5 people that have done it that you can open up to and talk to them now.
And so that sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, where the real inspiration for CLR Connection came from, right? Or to some extent?
Yes. Yes, and it took me 7 years to get there.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're the biggest distractors and confusers of ourselves, right? I mean, it's like, oh, we're just waiting for the right time. I'm like, well, no one can even describe the right time other than if you think you want to do it and you're willing to do it. It's start right now.
100%. Like, start yesterday. At the same time.
Start yesterday.
At the same time, right here I am 7-8 years. And for most of my professional career, professional baseball was buried on my LinkedIn as volunteer experience because I didn't want to talk about it. Because I had been grown up with people who just talked about and led with themselves as, hey, I'm the baseball player. Hey, this is Charlie, the baseball player. I'm like, no. I'm Charlie who happens to play baseball.
Yes.
Well, when you're trying to sell software for 7 years and you're figuring out who you are outside of the game and you don't know who your identity is, what you do, what you like, because you didn't go on a identity marathon run, you don't know that. And then all of a sudden, other people have to tell you and remind you. And I am forever thankful for those people who allowed me to find that space 8-9 years, which has put me in the space of where I'm at today.
So we live this young adult life of demonstrating pretty meaningful discipline, stacking wins and losses, but a lot more micro wins than we typically give ourselves credit for.
Yep.
We get to a good place. The environment, typically outside of our control, might change on us, and we're forced to go through a transition. And all of a sudden, we don't believe in ourselves at all. I often think that this is definitely where auditing your circles and shrinking your community, if you will, down to people who are going to encourage your creativity, your core, your belief in self is critical. Why? Do you agree with that? And if you do or don't, maybe just expand on that thought.
Yeah. I got 2 lenses on it. First one being absolutely redefine your starting 5. Again, one of the parts that I talked about.
Love that.
Redefine it, and based on the season in which what life you're in, those 5 people are gonna be different for what you need in that moment, right? Do I need the person who's gonna kind of inspire me to think bigger? Do I need the person who's gonna be honest? Do I need someone who's gonna calm me down because I'm moving too fast, or challenge or be contrarian to what I think? Like, we need to always be thinking about who our starting 5 is based on the current season in which we're at. Like, absolutely. The other side of it is that reminding myself of the community that has gotten me here. I struggled a lot with trying to find my space into narrowing my circle, while at the same time realizing that my circles, my core group of friends that I love dearly, that I'm fortunate to raise my families with, that is such a huge part of my day-to-day that I love, that I miss, that when I'm not getting that, they're outside of my, let's say, business circle, but they serve such a huge part for my community. And because I'm being disciplined and intentional with my presence there, they do matter more than they probably think they do. While at the same time, my, let's call business starting 5 is completely different. So right. I'm being very intentional about both of those circles, but the starting 5 continues to shift.
So Let me ask you this: when you're working with somebody, you're
Yep.
pouring into somebody who has a clear vision on where in sort of like, destination that, I think to me, like there really aren't destinations. It's just
Yeah.
this like, muse of like, what would I like it to look and feel like someday for my life, right? When you have somebody that you're working with that has some clarity on that, share with me what you'd say on the topic of triple down on your strengths or address the weaknesses.
I like this notion of looking at the strengths and tripling down more, as I think that it's not necessarily about addressing the weaknesses, it's about acknowledging it and then finding a way to raise that floor a little bit,
Yes.
and then being honest with yourself on where you need help, as we talked about earlier.
Got it.
Whereas if I know, using a baseball reference, I'm not going to throw it by anyone. I'm not a 95 to 100 mile an hour guy.
Yeah.
But I will throw a split wherever the hell I want,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to get a first pitch strike. I know that. Why am I trying to be somebody different? Same goes for the way in which I'm trying to operate as a speaker, right? Like we have our own voice, our own authentic way in which we're showing up as leaders. Like, why am I going to try and be this person? I don't need to go create this type of workout or this other. Like, I'm going to go ahead and do me.
Yes.
And lean into that side of me as a leader and understand how important that is. More than I'm going to do maybe rinse and repeat for somebody else.
I believe that really hungry, obsessive, determined people are urgent. They're just urgent in just like their presence, right? Things just run on time or better than on time, typically. But I also believe in this idea of, hey, if you want to go fast, you're probably going to go alone. It's going to be rather lonely. But if you want to go far, you want to get as close as possible to this vision I have in my mind of the possibility of life being so fulfilling and purposeful, like we should go together. And going together slows everything down. Tell me your thoughts on that.
Never in my life would I thought this is what I'd be doing.
Yes.
I'm born, as I've shared, and rooted in community. So the realization that whether it's the expectations that I have of myself and the people that I'm surrounded by, like I'm constantly observing. I've been told like, hey, like you're an observer at heart, which is why you're able to operate and navigate rooms in the way in which you do. And I've realized that I need and I would want people to be able to meet me where I'm at. And I'm constantly trying to search for that until I removed that. And I was like, look, you have to go alone. And then you'll know, intuition, presence, by observation, when you're in a room with somebody, when you just feel a different type of energy where like they're going to meet you where you're at.
Yeah.
And then once you know that, lock in.
Let's go.
As opposed to trying to force. And a friend showed me, she shared with like what her Irish mother used to tell her. A lot of doors seem to be locked and we try to like bash through them. There's doors that are open. Stop being a fool and go to the door that's open.
Yes.
I have found myself trying to bring people along or trying to have people like, come on, let's go through this door, realizing that there's a door that's open right in front of me.
Yeah.
I'm just not paying attention to it and being present with that person when they're right in front of me.
Yeah.
They're not online. They're in front of me. And I think that notion of going further, right? It's those people that I'm in search of, while also understanding that it's got to start from you because it always starts from you and it always will start from you.
What are you reading right now?
Yes,
Listening to,
sure.
right? I mean, I believe in reading or listening.
I listen to a lot. I will say probably a bit different than maybe a lot of people in our spaces. The book that I tend to pick up more and more is from Priya Parker, and it's called The Art of Gathering. And when I was introduced to this book, it was around how to host events, community, right? And it's detailed. We're talking details on what gathering, the art of it, entails.
Really?
It's the specifics. It's walking into the room and being welcome, not just with a text, a phone call, a bag, with all of these books that speak to what I talk about, right? It's the intentional different details of when you're setting up community, from the time you send out the invitation to the time that you leave and you send something as a follow-up. And she just paints this beautiful example of how people do it. And I've just find myself always picking that up and going, okay, here's a different way you can approach that email. Here's a different way you can host.
Yes.
And, I'll share this with you. One of the most important pieces that I didn't realize I did after reading it was when people leave your event, you walk them out if you can.
100.
And my 4-year-old daughter, we had a Paw Patrol party. We were all Paw Patrol. And
yeah, so mine were as well
right.
a long time ago.
And one of the coolest takeaways from the day is my sweet Avery, the middle, she's not the most extroverted. She's going to get her little party bag, and she found out that one of my good buddies, Ryan, and his daughter and son were leaving. And she's like, Dad, and she grabs the bag and runs outside because she realized that they didn't get their little takeaway bag.
Yeah.
So here I see little Sky running down the street to make sure to say bye because I imagine she watches me walk every single person out of my house.
Yes.
Including my mom and dad, every single time they come over the house.
Yes.
And that's one of the key principles in the book, is they talk about like how that intention and detail matters for the people that you bring into your space.
Yes.
Just like the people you omit from the space.
Yeah.
It's just as important, start to finish. And seeing her do that just lit me up.
There's the Gold Standard, which I think is an incredible book about the Ritz-Carlton, the story of the Ritz-Carlton.
I've heard about it. I have not read it.
It's just really special. And then there's the Starbucks Experience, Chapter 2, where it says everything matters. And I'm so aligned with you on that. We try to have somebody waiting for our guests in the lobby downstairs, ride the elevator with them. We walk them out. I mean, my clients are constantly like, oh, you don't have to. No, I'd like to. Right. And it's like, in a world where, I was just whining to you 10 minutes ago about how nobody wants to say good morning to me. I'm like, what? Like, I'm showered. I'm relatively okay groomed.
Yeah.
I'm
I got a nice suit on. I'm feeling good. Give me something.
I'm like, no one wants to say hi to me.
Man, but see, like that, and that's why in this virtual space, in this virtual world, like that's what I'm talking. Like those small things, and I shared that story. Look up when you see your neighbor.
Oh,
when you think about somebody, text them, call them. That was one of the things that I talk about, right? Like I hadn't seen my neighbor in 4 years from the pandemic. I text her. I'm like, Lacey, how are you? She's like, good. Do you know anyone looking for a house? My neighbors are selling their home. Actually, my godparents of my children are. Oh, really? Yeah, awesome. Guess who's the godparents of my children? I'm sorry. Guess who's the neighbor now? It's the godparents of my children, because I text Lacey. Now they came over, grabbed a bottle of wine, walked over there, met the neighbors. They didn't even put the house on the market because they met my friends, godparents. Now Auntie Judy and Uncle Danny are across the street every single day.
What?
And my little girls see that.
Yes.
And that just happened because I looked up,
yes,
or I thought of my neighbor that I typically look up and talk to and hadn't seen her. I was like, how are you?
Yes. Wow. Yeah, I love it,
Cool
man.
is that?
It's like we were talking last night. We had a nice dinner after the Pistons game.
Yeah.
With some new friends, and it's like, hey, man, closed mouths do not get fed. And it's not exactly the story you said, but it's like that would not have that dream. You would have never been able to hit the play button on that dream had you not reached out and took the ownership to be proactive and engage. That's awesome. Let me ask you this. Mm-hmm. You're on this like really special trajectory with your speaking and coaching business. What would you say is the 60-second commercial of if you're feeling, thinking, or experiencing this, and this, you should reach out to me and just have a conversation.
If you find yourself playing somebody else's game and you're ready to start playing yours, it starts with first knowing thyself.
Yeah.
Or like, I need to know who I am. Yeah. And then it's thankful to my mother and my favorite saying from her, know your players, right? If you're leading a team, you got to be able to know your players. And then if you can know yourself and know your players, the third one is you got to tell that story. And those are the three principles, the three things, not principles, the three ways in which I typically work with somebody. It's I help you know who you are at your core for yourself, for your team, and then be able to work with your team. And then no matter what, you have to be able to tell that story. You can't tell your story unless you know yourself. And we don't spend the time to do that.
And what would you say the roadmap or runway looks and feels like in working with you? One-on-ones, small group, online curriculum. What does that look and feel like?
Usually 2 different vehicles, unless I'm on stage talking. My one-on-one clients, right? It's usually retainer-based or a couple different packages that I have that I work with somebody. The thing that I'm really fired up about, and it's fairly new, it's my group coaching called The Connected. And that's where I'm taking leaders, again, not curriculum-based. It's more of like you show up, you bring what's important for you right now, in the here and now, and we facilitate that as a group. And now I'm 2-3 groups in, and we're starting to expand, where I'm curating it very small and intentional so that you can show up with whatever you have on mind and handle that in the moment. And I'm really excited about that. And that's my group coaching called The Connected.
I really like that. I had seen something on that, and I want to say I just commend you. I commend you for not just enrolling and subscribing everyone who raises their hand.
Yeah.
You know, I just think back to that reel by Cody Sanchez. Again, shout out to her. I mean, I just think she's fire.
Yep.
And she talks about the impact of hiring a B player or putting a B player in the room with A players and how overall productivity decreases across all of them by the presence of a B player. So really like and want to see more about the platform, The Connected. Where can people find information about your services?
So my Instagram follow is Charles L. Ruiz. And then obviously the website was clrconnection.com.
Okay.
But you can find most of my stuff on my Instagram or my LinkedIn, which is primarily where I talk about more of the business side of my work on LinkedIn naturally.
Can I ask you one last question before we go?
Absolutely.
Actually, I want to ask you 2 questions. Are you okay with that? You have time?
Yeah.
Okay. When did you realize you were a lyrical genius? Like when did you realize that you could do like video poetry like no one else's business?
Man, I still don't. I guess now I'm owning it a little bit more. I have to acknowledge that the communications firm that I was at, we used to train people, and I would watch people, and I'm like, wait a second, I think I can do this. And I think the more and more I got comfortable coaching and teaching those that were on camera, then when it came down to me owning my own business, I was like, I'm gonna go ahead and just let it rip a couple of times in my gym. And people started to reach out and be like, hey, like, I'm loving the stuff. And I'm like, oh, I've also been doing this for like 6 years behind the scenes, but now I'm in front of the camera.
Yes.
And I think maybe, let's say 2 years ago, I realized maybe I got something here.
Love it. Last one. So I can tell like you're this incredibly deep, critical thinker. You've talked about presence in a way. I think you're probably the first guest that we've had, and we've maybe done almost 100 episodes over the last 2.5 years, who has spoken about presence the way you have. Decades pass.
Yep.
Everything comes to an end. Sienna, Avery, and Sydney are sitting there as grandparents. What do they say about you?
Well, other than trying to make me cry,
I'm crying with you.
Yeah. It kind of goes into this notion of he chose us, he chose presence over all of the other things that he could have been doing. He always chose us. And I hope that that's something that they would relay and take on to their families, and what I think the lasting legacy would be. They chose presence, that he chose presence, that I chose presence for them.
I mean, I wouldn't call today the burn, but I would definitely call it fire.
I'll take that.
Folks, I mean, I think, I've had this like distant crush on my man Charlie Ruiz. So what a gift to have him here. I mean, baseball being just like a simple, quick footnote in his life. Incredible keynote speaker. The coaching is definitely next level. And I think for those of you high performers or aspiring high performers that are thinking about mindset, leadership, communication, and identity, he is somebody that you need to reach out to. You heard it. It's Charles or Charlie? It's Charlie Ruiz on Instagram, right?
Yeah, I'm Charles. Yeah, Charles L. Ruiz.
On Instagram, CLR Connection, website. Reach out to my man. Shout out to the lovely ladies back in Cali, Leah, Sienna, Avery, Sydney. Thank you. And to Mrs. Ruiz. Man, what a just king of a son you have. So blessings to you, bro.
Thank you. Honored.